Welcome to today's second presentation of Safe Zone Training. My name is Tim Delacqua, and I will be your presenter today. Today's presentation is sponsored by the Great Falls LGBTQ+ Center by a grant from the Montana Pride Foundation. The Safe Zone Training is based on the Safe Zone project devised by Meg Bolger and Sam Killerman in 2013. We have revised this training on an ongoing basis in order to meet the needs of our audience. Our question and answer section of the training has a large impact.
Next in our program, we will be going to the continuation of the match game menu that we had last time.
The first thing that we're going to look at are the symbols of gay pride. Like I said earlier, the cultural things that are involved with our community involve many of these symbols. These are pride symbols and flags. Each one of the letters in our alphabet soup has one or multiple flags in order to provide some sense of identification and pride. As you can see from the scrolling, we have different symbols with the name of the symbol on the right hand side. We have lipstick lesbian pride. There are many symbols underneath that. Basic lesbian pride, feminist lesbian pride, gay male pride. If you go to a pride parade, you will see many of these flags. So that each, like I said, each letter within our alphabet soup has some sense of pride for their particular group.
This presentation is not complete without all the flags, but there are so many of them. But I just wanted you to get an idea of, again, part of our culture and part of the things that we feel strongly about. There's even a flag for straight allies. And Two-Spirit for Native Americans. And even the Jewish gay pride flag. The Philadelphia Pride flag has a top black and brown, which signifies the people of color in that town. Philadelphia, that city, I'm sorry. Progress Pride is a new flag that is being proposed to be our central flag. There are mixed reviews between this flag and the original Pride flag by Gilbert Baker. Okay, we're back to our menu. We're going to look at all the different letters in the alphabet soup so that you all can understand the groups of people that make up our community. Okay, you see at the top the letters. Now, LGBTQ actually stands for all of these. That's kind of an umbrella term. What I've done here is spelled them all out. So we start off with lesbian. Women that are only attracted to other women. Gay. Men that are attracted only to other men. Gay also has been used as an umbrella term to describe the homosexual men and women. This was back in the 60s and is still sometimes used by older folk like myself. But it has been changed to specifically represent gay men. The next one is bisexual, a person that is attracted to both sexes. Transgender, a person that has or is transitioning to the opposite gender, as they were born as the wrong gender in the wrong body. So the transition would be from female to male or male to female. Now, this particular definition has some, I would say, there's some difficulties with this. Issues of wrong gender is not correct. Basically, at birth, it is assumed that depending on your genitalia, if it's male genitalia, that you are male gender, and it is incorrect at birth. It's not like it's wrong, but it is not what people would expect it to be. It is normal for that person. I threw in the word transsexual. It's an older term and basically is used sometimes today to refer to someone who transitions from one sex to another. In other words, they have the gender affirming surgery. Queer. Queer is an umbrella term for sexual and gender minorities who are not heterosexual or cisgender. Cisgender being the term is anyone who is not transgender, which can include just about all the other letters in the alphabet here. Queer is a term that for the older generation, including myself, is a difficult term to use. It has been used very derogatorily, and so some of the younger generation, however, have grabbed onto this term, and it's very important to them. The issue of the whole alphabet soup, all of these people, the issue of identity is tremendously important. So for the younger generation, the term queer is something that they hang on to desperately and want to be known by that. There's also the term genderqueer, which gets involved with the fluidity of gender not being binary. We'll talk about some of that more in part of our training here. Q stands for questioning. Someone that is questioning their sexual or gender orientation, unsure which sex they are attracted to. Many people have this questioning that goes on. Sometimes they and other people in their environment say, well, they're just not really sure. They're just going through a stage. This stage is particularly helpful to have someone be there with you to really kind of sort out for yourself what feelings you're having and settling of some of these questions. For the younger kids who come out or who have not come out, so for younger kids, adolescents who are questioning, sometimes it becomes very difficult. We have a high percentage of young women who are questioning, and there's a large percentage of them that get pregnant. As for some of them, kind of unconsciously, it resolves the dilemma about whether they are attracted to women or men, and it answers that question. However, not always is that the best way to do it. Intersex. A general term used for a variety of conditions in which a person is born with a reproductive or sexual anatomy that doesn't seem to fit the typical definitions of male and female. The inappropriate and older term is hermaphrodite, which for people who are intersex feel is more like a diagnosis than something that they truly are. In the past, it has been decided by physicians at birth what sexual orientation each person will have. It later went on to being more of boards, ethics boards, deciding which sexual orientation the child has. At this point in time, there is a movement by people who are intersex to allow themselves to decide what they would like to do. The surgery is very painful from what I've heard and what from people have described, and people want to have their own decision making so that they can decide if they want surgery or they don't and just be who they are. Allies. A straight person that supports the LGBTQ+ community in a positive way. And there will be further trainings from our center to be able to have allies understand what that means in a positive way. Asexual, a person that isn't sexually attracted to either gender. Initially, for myself, a long time ago in my training, particularly with females, the thought was that they had traumatic events occur early in their childhood, which caused them to, quote unquote, not like sex. they were quote-unquote frigid. We now know that this is not something that comes out of some sort of traumatic event, but is just on the spectrum of the desire for sexuality. Many people who are asexual are married. They generally are not sexually attracted to their partner. They have much more of an emotional attachment, and at times, and for some of them, they do have sexual intercourse, but it's not something that they do frequently. Pansexual. A person that is attracted to a person because of their personality. They do not care what sex or gender they date. They care about what is inside. For someone who's pansexual, their attraction is to almost everybody in the alphabet soup, and certainly sometimes within the focus of the genderqueer, the fluidity that transgender people feel between the binary, which is male and female. The next one is Two-Spirit. The Two-Spirit term refers to Native American, Alaskan Natives, lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender individuals. So there are the descriptions of each one of the letters in the alphabet. So let's go back to our match game menu. And our last part of the menu is two women of color who actually started the transgender movement, and give a little bit about their history and how they began. This is Sylvia Rivera. She was the one of the starters of the transgender movement and starter of the riot at Stonewall. It was said that she threw the first brick at the building and at the police. In an interview, she stated that was not true, but she was the one that threw the first Molotov cocktail at a police car, setting it on fire. This is another picture of Sylvia. Very vibrant person, very outspoken. This is her in one of the Pride parades. She has a very different look in many of these pictures, but always a very loving and caring person. She started Star House in New York, a place where many of the transgender homeless could come. They would help them, feed them, get them started, get them a job, move them out, try to protect them against some of the things in the environment that were harmful, such as people raping them and beating them and murdering them. This is a painting of Sylvia on the left, and a quote from her on the right. "We didn't take no shit from nobody. We had nothing to lose. We all had rights. We had nothing to lose. I'll be the first one to step on any organization, any politician's toes, if I have to get the rights for my community." This is Sylvia in a younger picture. She described herself as a Puerto Rican transsexual woman, and she is also a large activist at the time. These again are parades, as you might call them, or demonstrations. And there she is again. Sylvia gave a speech in 1973, the one here. It wasn't actually a speech, it was an interaction with the crowd. It was 1973, Pride Parade in June, and some of her concerns about the distinction between transgender folk, the sexual orientation of different people in the alphabet, and the sense of gender identification, which is different than sexual orientation. So gender identity and sexual orientation was split even back then. And there was not always a sense of camaraderie between the two. This is, again, the speech that she gave, which is very famous. Let's listen to it.
Quiet down. I've been trying to get up here all day for your gay brothers and your gay sisters in jail that write me every motherfucking week and ask for your help. And you all don't do a goddamn thing for them. And they write Star, not the women's group. They do not write women. They do not write men. They write Star because we're trying to do something for them. But you all tell me to go and hide my tail between my legs. I will not put up with this shit. I have been beaten. I have had my nose broken. I have been thrown in jail. I have lost my job. I have lost my apartment for gay liberation. And you all treat me this way? What the fuck's wrong with you all? Think about that. I believe in the gay power. I believe in us getting our rights, or else I would not be out there fighting for our rights. That's all I wanted to say to your people. Come and see the people at Star House on 12th Street. The people that are trying to do something for all of us and not men and women that belong to a white middle class club. And that's what you all belong to. Revolution now! Gay power! Louder gay power!
After this event and some of the interviews that were done with Sylvia, she talked about the major split that occurred and that she felt that within the community that she would not get much help. She would not get support from other people within the community, and that she and the other transgender folk were going to be pretty much on their own. And this continued for a while. Some of the issues that were present here is that most of the people in the crowd, their part of the community was involved with their sexual orientation. And for many of them, they could come out on weekends and enjoy togetherness in bars and places like that, and then they could go home and still be seen as straight, not coming out straight with their work, certainly as a level of protection. Many of the transgender folk, once they had made the transition, were out and there was no way to go back. So they faced a certain level of oppression and discrimination that for most of the people in the community they did not have happen to them. Okay, this is another pioneer and a working friend with Sylvia Rivera, Marsha P. Johnson. Picture of her when she is fairly young. This is a picture of her as she got older, part of a pride parade. She was involved with the Star House. This is a picture of her, very pretty. Great smile. And certainly an activist. She described herself as a African American or black transgender woman. It's a picture from her from the Pride Parade in Portland. She's a very flashy dresser. And these are pictures of her in her happier days. And this was a painting that had been done of her. Again, some more pictures. And here she is on that day, the Pride Day in 1973, when Sylvia gave her presentation, and they are walking together in the parade. This is called a queer space. Marsha Johnson was born in 1945 and died in 1992. Her body was found floating in the river. The police believed that it was a death by suicide. Although witnesses reported seeing Johnson harassed by a youth on July 4th. Since then, there has been many thoughts that she was murdered. There have been subsequent investigations, but nothing came out of it. But there is a sign there to signify the significance of her death and the end of someone who was very much a Stonewall veteran, a performer, panhandler, prostitute, and a Warhol model. Her original dead name was Malcolm Machias. Sylvia, in many interviews after this, talks about the loss of Marcia, how important she was to the movement, how important she was to Sylvia. There are several documentaries that have come lately about Marcia and her death, and documentaries about her life. So some of the questions that come up, typically at this point of the training: why does everyone have to have a label? Why does everyone have to be a significant, separate part of the alphabet soup? And again, it's based on sexual orientation and gender, and it gives them kind of like a subgroup that they can be with to feel solidarity, and then all of them coming together for a strong gay pride solidarity. Many folks want to identify with others to share experience and in solidarity against common oppressions. Here we are going to get into the complex nature of SOGI, which stands for Sexual Orientation and Gender Identity. It is an inclusive term that encompasses all individuals, regardless of where they identify on the sexual orientation or gender identity spectrums, as every person has a sexual orientation and every person has a gender identity. It includes lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, queer, two-spirit, heterosexual, cisgender, and more. As the transgender community continues to fight for civil rights in the U.S., one of the most common arguments against progress is that transgender people are a recent phenomenon. This is not true. Some regard trans people as a symptom of the postmodern condition, or identity politics. Not true again. Many claim that the struggle for transgender rights is difficult because the concept is still new to many Americans. That is true. Here we have Mr. and Mrs. Fred and Sylvia Binary. They represent the way most of us have been raised to believe that gender and sex were the same. This we call binary. It is based on a numbering scheme in which there are only two possible values for each digit: 0 or 1, no or yes, good or bad. Most of us would believe that because Fred has male genitalia, then male gender is who he is. The same with Sylvia, who has female genitalia, would be of female gender. This binary link, while present for most of us, is not a connective link for all of us. This is the gender revolution, which we are in the midst of. Why are millennials more likely to think male and female are fluid ideas? And what do the experience of those who identify as trans tell us about how society treats women and men? A gender revolutionary is any and all individuals who challenge the confines of the gender binary system. Includes drag queens, drag kings, transgender, transsexual, cross-dressers, and all manner of other individuals. Gender refers to the socially constructed characteristics of men and women, such as norms, roles, and relationships of and between groups of men and women. It varies from society to society and can be changed. While most people are born either male or female, they are taught appropriate norms and behaviors, including how they should interact with others of the same or opposite sex within households, communities, and workplaces. When individuals or groups do not seem to fit established gender norms, they often face stigma, discriminatory practices, or social exclusion, all of which adversely affect health. It is important to be sensitive to different identities that do not necessarily fit into the binary male or female sex characteristics. This represents the breaking away from the binary. We have gender identity, which is up here in one's brain, and we have sexual orientation, which is down here within one's genitalia. Next, we are going to use our genderbread person to be able to signify all the different areas and combinations that there can be in an individual. Albert Einstein once said, if you can't explain it to a 6-year-old, you don't understand it yourself. So please give me some latitude with this. Gender is a tough subject to tackle. There are many facets to consider and many pressures at play. And we all have been conditioned in such a way that our first instinct is almost unanimously wrong. But we're here going to tackle it. Coming to our aid, I would like to present to you the gender-bred person. Gender is a social construct. Each culture has its own idea of what is male, female, other, or both. So let's talk first about gender expression. Gender expression is an individual's presentation of their gender through behavior, clothing, hairstyle, voice, and body characteristics. It is something that is not tied to their sexual orientation. Gender expression is all about how you demonstrate gender through the ways you act, dress, behave, and interact, whether that is intentional or unintended. Gender expression is interpreted by others based on traditional gender norms. Men wear pants, women wear dresses. Gender expression is something that often changes from day to day, outfit to outfit, and event setting to event or setting. Cross-dressing is the name for the act of a person wearing clothing meant for a different gender. Notice that the stress here is on the way a person dresses rather than on his or her sexual preferences or gender identity. A cross-dressing individual may be homosexual, heterosexual, or bisexual. A drag queen is a person, usually male, who dresses in drag and often acts with exaggerated femininity and in feminine gender roles. Here we have in the middle Divine from the movie Hairspray. Divine is a gentleman with male genitalia and plays a female in the movie Hairspray, and of course does a great job. On the bottom right, we have Jaden Smith, who is Will Smith's son, who wears clothing in which he finds comfortable. He is a male, and his gender expression sometimes borders on female and male, because that is what he is comfortable with. Next, we get into gender identity. Gender identity is an individual's sense of their own gender, separate from whatever genitalia they have. It is believed to be developed between the ages of 2 and 7. It is who you believe you are. Gender identity is all about how you think about yourself. It's about how you internally interpret the chemistry that composes you, the hormone levels. As you know it, do you think you fit better into the societal role of man or woman? Or does neither ring particularly true for you? Do you have aspects of your identity that align with elements from both? Or do you consider your gender to fall outside the gender norms completely? Individuals who are transgender and transsexual do not identify with the sex and/or gender constructs that they were born into. Some transgender people's sense of difference is so strong that they identify as transsexual and believe their assigned sex at birth was wrong, and that their correct sex is one that aligns with their internal feelings. They often have a deep desire to alter their physical appearance until it better matches their gender identity. The two most common methods of this include sex reassignment therapy and/or surgery. Not all trans people identify as male or female. Trans people have all sorts of different identities outside the gender binary. Trans folks actually have many different sexual orientations. Gender identity and sexual orientations are separate spectra. Not all trans people want surgery, and even few get surgery. So not all trans folk are gay or queer. Many of them are straight. Next, we get into attraction, romantically and sexually. Attraction, who you are romantically and sexually into. We have two related ideas here. On the left of each, we have nobody, meaning no feelings or attraction. On the right, we have men, males, masculinity, and women, females, femininity. Sexual attraction be thought of as the want, need, or desire for physical sexual contact and relationships. Romantic attraction is an affinity and love for others and a desire for emotional relationships. Some folks have both. Some folks have neither. Many experience more of one than the other. Sexual orientation is all about who you are physically, spiritually, and emotionally attracted to. Here we've broken it out specifically into sexual and romantic attractions, and the labels tend to describe the relationships between your gender and the gender types you are attracted to. If you are a man, in the middle here, we have the picture. If you are a male who is attracted to a woman, you are straight. If you are a woman who is attracted to men, you're straight. To the left, we have the next picture with two males. If you're a male who is attracted to men, you're gay. To the right of the center picture where there's two feminines, if you're a woman who is attracted to a woman, you're a lesbian. Then we go back over to the far left. If you're a man who's attracted to men and women, you're bisexual. And far over on the right, if you're a woman who's attracted to men and women, you're bisexual. These are labels most of us know the most about. We hear the most about it. It's salient in our lives, and we can best understand where we stand with it. It's pretty cut and dry, right? Well, maybe. There's much more to attraction and sexuality. Some folks define and experience attraction without gender as a factor. They might identify as pansexual. If you experience romantic attraction but not sexual, you may be identified as asexual or ace. If you experience romantic attraction but not sexual, you might identify as asexual or ace. Or depending on the genders you're attracted to, hetero, homo, or panromantic. If you're attracted to folks who are trans or androgynous, you might identify as scoliosexual. Interestingly enough, pioneer research conducted by Alfred Kinsey in 1948 uncovered that most people aren't absolutely straight or gay or lesbian. Instead of just saying, do you like dudes or chicks, very sciencey, I know, he asked people to report their fantasies, dreams, thoughts, emotional investments in others, and frequency of sexual contact. Based on his findings, he broke sexuality down into a 7-point scale and reported that most people who identify as straight are actually somewhere between 1 and 3 on the scale, which means they are predominantly heterosexual, incidentally homosexual, predominantly heterosexual, but more than incidentally homosexual, equally heterosexual and homosexual. He also found that people who identify as lesbian or gay are between 3 and 5, meaning most of us are a little bisexual. And most people who identify as lesbian gay are between 3 and 5, equally heterosexual and homosexual, predominantly homosexual but more than incidentally heterosexual, predominantly homosexual, incidentally heterosexual, meaning most of us are a little bisexual. So here we have the issue of sexual orientation, and then we can get into the issue of gender identity. And as you can see, the difference between gender identity, we have the binary of male and female, we have all the fluidity in between, referred to as gender queer within the gender fluid field. You can, one day, feel gender-wise more male than female, or the opposite the next day. You can be attracted to many different people within the gender fluid. You can be attracted to many people within the gender queer. So the attraction that people have from one another is not as simple as male to female or what we typically think that it may be. The next one is the biological sexual orientation. Biological sex, referred to sometimes as the equipment under the hood. Biological sex refers to the measurable organs, hormones, and chromosomes you possess. Let's consider biological sex as the ultra-reductive way society does. Being female means you have a vagina, ovaries, 2 X chromosomes, predominantly estrogen, and the ability to grow a baby in your abdominal area. Being male means having testes, a penis, and XY chromosome configuration, predominant testosterone, and the ability to put a baby in a female's abdominal area. And being intersex can be any combination of what I just described. We'll talk about intersex later. But these 3 sexual identities are the basic constructs. Here we are going to talk about intersex. Hannah Gaba Odile is a 29-year-old supermodel from Belgium. She recently revealed back in 2017 that she is intersex and is hoping to give a voice to the people who are often in the shadows. born with androgen insensitivity syndrome, in which a woman has an XY chromosome, it's more typically found in men. She had internal undescended testes, and at the age of 10 they were removed. At 18 years old, she underwent an equally distressing procedure in the form of vaginal reconstructive surgery. She described the process as hideous. Here is a short video on intersex.
Each human being is born unique. Somehow, I was born meek. To understand who I am, you need to imagine that I'm neither a male nor female. It has not been easy for my parents. In a world that is used to thinking in opposite terms, it can be difficult to understand shades. And they needed an answer. Doctors did not accept the idea that my body didn't show the traits they expected in a boy or girl. And they told them that in this case, the only solution is normalization surgery. They were thinking in black and white frameworks and proposed to my parents a sex change surgery, one that would have had lifelong, irreversible effects. They almost convinced my parents, but mom and dad are heroes. They began to study and talk with other doctors, intersex associations, and parents. They discovered that my situation is less rare than one might think, that you can grow happily with a body like mine, and that surgery compromised the health of many like me. Sadly, intersex genital mutilation surgeries are carried out regularly, even though they've been addressed as human rights violations. No one deserves to undergo a forced sex change.
The term hermaphrodite was the term that used to be used for intersex, and at this particular point in time it is not used because it is seen as something pejorative. So intersex is a general term used for a variety of conditions in which a person is born with a reproductive or sexual anatomy that doesn't seem to fit the typical definition of female or male. So here's what we do know. If you ask experts at medical centers how often a child is born so noticeably atypical in terms of genitalia that a specialist in sex differentiation is called in, the number comes out to about 1 in 1,500 to 1 in 2,000 births. But a lot more people than that are born with a subtler form of sex anatomy variations, some of which don't show up until later in life. The total number of people whose bodies differ from the standard male or female is 1 in 100 births, and about the same as all the people with red hair. This is one more of a video that I would like to show you. It is a short video, but it's very important. This is a transgender male named Ben Barris, and he is being interviewed on the Charlie Rose Show.
Tonight we continue our exploration of the magnificent human brain with a look at gender identity and the biology of the brain. Gender identity is a person's subjective experience of their own gender. It may or may not correspond to the sex assigned to them at birth. The term transgender describes someone who feels his or her body and gender do not match. It is estimated that about 700,000 transgender people live in the United States. One of them joins me today to share his experience. Ben Myers is professor and chair of neurobiology at Stanford University. He lived and worked as Barbara Barris until he changed his sex to male in 1997. Let me begin with Ben. Tell me the experience that you went through. Share with us as much as you can about what led up to your decision, how you carried forward, and the impact it's had on your life.
Sure. I think in many ways my experience is probably typical for other transgendered people. I was, I think, only about 4 or 5 years old when I first started to have strong feelings that I felt more like a boy. I was born as a girl, Barbara, but I felt like a boy. I played with little boys. I preferred boys' toys. I remember dreadfully wishing I could be in the Cub Scouts and Boy Scouts. Every Halloween I would dress up as an army man or as a football player. This all just seemed very normal to me. I felt like a boy. But as I got into middle school, early teen years, I did start to feel more and more uncomfortable with this. I didn't feel I should have breasts. I didn't feel comfortable at all wearing dresses, makeup, jewelry. And it became increasingly uncomfortable when I got into high school. I started to be teased more by kids, and I just had a lot of confusion about my gender, and I felt very ashamed of it. I never spoke with friends or family about it at all, ever once.
No one.
No. I just felt very ashamed and very confused. Don't forget, this is the days before the internet, so there wasn't a lot of information about this sort of thing. So as I got into my 20s, I was doing well. Well, I didn't feel good about my gender. I was doing well in my career. I was doing medical training and research training. But I was increasingly uncomfortable, and like many trans people, I started to think about suicide. I never actually attempted suicide, but I thought about it a lot. And this is actually a picture of me back when I was Barbara. I think I was 30 at that point, and I was a bridesmaid at my little sister's wedding. And I can still remember vividly, even though that was 30 years ago, just the agony that I felt, the discomfort putting on that dress, wearing jewelry, wearing makeup, and still 30 years since I still remember that. But anyway, I did complete my training and begin a job at Stanford about 20 years ago when I was age 40. And about 2 years into that, I actually developed breast cancer. And I was still very confused about my gender identity, but I knew that I didn't like to have breasts. And so when the doctor said he needed to do a mastectomy to remove the cancer, which very fortunately was picked up early and I was cured of, I said, while you're there, please take off the other breast. And he was quite horrified by this. Perhaps he was the first one I shared my feelings about gender identity, but since this cancer runs in my family, he did agree to remove the other breast. And I just can't tell you how therapeutic that was. I felt so relieved to have those breasts removed, and I recognized that was a very different response than my mom had when she had her mastectomy. She saw this as a huge blow to her femininity. But after the surgery, the doctor started talking to me about reconstructing the breasts, and I was absolutely horrified. I said, there's no way you're putting those things back on me. So this was sort of maybe increasingly a clue to me that really there was something a little bit different about my gender. And it was only about a year later, I was reading the San Francisco Chronicle one day when I read a several-page article about the life of James Green, an openly female-to-male transgender person in the Bay Area. And I realized for the first time in my life that there were other people that had experienced the same sorts of gender confusion, that there were other people like me and that I might be transgender. And so I went to see Don Laub, who was a sex change pioneer at Stanford, and he ran a gender clinic. And indeed, after they evaluated me, they told me that I thought I was transgender, and they offered me the possibility of changing my sex, which was immediately irresistible to me. And very quickly, within weeks, I decided to change sex. I'd already had the upper surgery, the mastectomies. I did not want lower surgery, but so all that was needed was to take some testosterone, and you can see the effects that it's had on me. It's powerful stuff. And one of the most surprising things about the testosterone was that I actually, to my great surprise, it became much harder for me to cry. And male to females report that it now becomes much easier for them to cry. So that was perhaps a surprising experience. But I think the main experience that I had is I just felt after I changed sex, it's hard to describe the intense relief that I felt, just like this weight lifted off of my back, and I've been so much happier since. I've never had another suicidal thought. I have to say that at the time I decided to do this, had been a scientist at Stanford for several years, I was very worried that changing sex would harm my career. This was 20 years ago. But I have to say that everybody, all my colleagues and friends and family were immediately supportive, and I've been very fortunate to have my career continue and to have lots of wonderful students and so forth. I guess the other thing that I'd like to say is that I think the other surprise after changing my sex is that I found that living as a man has dramatically changed the way that people react to me. And I can tell you a story about an experience that happened to me shortly after I changed sex. A couple of years later, I was invited to give a seminar about my research at MIT. And one of my friends told me that after I gave the seminar, one of his colleagues was talking to him about the seminar, and he said, gee, that Ben Barres, his work is so much better than his sister's, Barbara. So I think that experience sort of points out something that all of us trans people, whether we're female to male or male to female, we've lived life as both genders, and we all share an intense anger at the different way that society treats men and women simply based on their gender. And I think in general, I think we would all say that in general, society with a man sort of assumes that they're competent until proven otherwise, and with women, they're considered incompetent until proven otherwise. And so this creates terribly unfair barriers for talented women in science. And so I now devote some part of my time to trying to help women in their careers.
Okay, that was Ben Barris on the Charlie Rose Show. Ben was able to share with us issues related to transgender and his own experience with transitioning. About 2 years ago, Ben passed away from his recurrence of cancer. That is our presentation of Safe Zone training. Watching the second part. Thank you so much. The center would like to thank you for watching this presentation. We would be more than happy to answer any of your questions. We would like to send you our handouts for this presentation and also the PowerPoint presentation. If you have any feedback you would like to give us, any suggestions, we would appreciate that also. Please send any of your questions or suggestions to the educational team email there at the bottom of the screen, the lgbtqcenter.edu@gmail.com. And thank you again.